saying hi. Glad you guys are here today.
Hi, Natasha.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to give us 2 more minutes, maybe 1, and then we'll get started.
So I have one question before we get started. Is there any way we can negotiate away this smoke? I'd like for that to be gone.
No, I have no expertise in that area.
I wish. Oh, I'm ready to be outside.
I know, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Miss riding my bike. I miss walking the dogs on nice long walks.
Mm-hmm.
Ready for
Even
that.
opening the windows would be great. My house is so stuffy right now. Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, people have so many challenges right now. It's too much.
Exactly. It is too much.
Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started, if that's all right with everybody. Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for being here. If you haven't been here before, I'm going to go through some introductions and then just kind of a rundown on how this session is going to go, and then we'll get started. And if you have been here before, welcome back. It's great to see you. I see some familiar names, so thanks for being here. So my name is Alyssa, and I am a second year law student interning for the University of Washington's Entrepreneurial Law Clinic. As you know, these sessions are part of a joint initiative between the Foster School of Business and UW's Law School. Our initiative is called Helping BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and women-owned small businesses survive and thrive post-COVID-19. This is the 4th part of a 5-part negotiation training session taught by Professor Elizabeth Umfris from the Foster School of Business. We're 4/5 of the way done after this, and it has been so awesome and so helpful. I hope you guys think so too. I'm learning a lot. So we have one more session in 2 weeks, and in case you didn't know, these sessions are all recorded and posted on our website. Jay probably can send you a link if he hasn't already. Yeah, okay. We have the sessions recorded. We have transcripts for those who are hearing impaired. We have translations in, right now we have Vietnamese, Spanish, and Mandarin. So really good resources. I encourage you to share. I encourage you to take a look at it. So just a little rundown of how this session is going to go. If you have any questions throughout these trainings, please feel free to send them in the chat box located in the bottom center of your Zoom screen. These sessions will be recorded because we are in a webinar format. Sorry, I just got distracted. Because we are in a webinar format, no one else in the session can see who you are, and you will be on mute the entire time. If you want to ask questions but do not want your name to appear in the chat box, you can hover over the 3 vertical dots in the corner of your personal identifier screen and press rename. I'm going to be periodically checking the chat session throughout the session, and Professor Umfris will have free breaks throughout the session where I will be reading off your questions. So keep sending those in throughout, and then I will ask those during the free breaks. After this session, we're going to be moving to virtual office hours and a separate Zoom link that Jay will be emailing you, and I will also be putting in the chat box. So look out for that. Last week, if you were there, we did a live negotiation training session where we had roles. I think it was great. I think people really liked it. I've gotten really good feedback on it. and we're going to be doing another similar one tonight. So I would definitely encourage you to come in the hour after this hour-long session. And then finally, I just want to encourage everybody here to feel free to reach out to the University of Washington's Entrepreneurial Law Clinic if you have any business formation questions, trademark questions, anything like that. Please reach out to us. We are here to be a resource. And we actually just finished our cycle for fall quarter applicants, but we're always collecting applications and would love to help anybody out in the winter. We are also providing free 30-minute legal consult sessions that you can sign up for. I think Jay also has a link for that. He is our resource man. So you should take a look at that. Completely free volunteer attorneys throughout the Seattle area who can help answer your personalized questions. So please look out for that. And oh, finally, please take the survey. I have been sending surveys out in an email, just asking about your demographics and your experience with these sessions. We want to try to help make this as good as possible for anyone who attends. And we also are trying to get information and demographics for our grantors so that we can continue to provide resources for sessions like this. So thank you all so much for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Umfris. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I really appreciate it. Alyssa, will you allow me to share my screen? And also, Jay, do you have anything that you want to report from the library?
I just want to say welcome everyone and thank you for being here. And all of the things that Alyssa was just mentioning, I get to sit in on all those and they've just been amazing. I mean, these workshops have been like mind-blowing as well as those legal consults. I mean, it's really been awesome. And there's a lot of great programming and assistance and things coming up. And so like, reach out to me or my colleagues anytime and we'll help connect you to any of those if you have those kind of needs. But welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Jay. I really appreciate all the resources that Seattle Public Library provides, and Alyssa for your expert help in getting these sessions going, so thank you. So for our agenda today, we're going to be talking about integrative strategies review. So integrative negotiations, as you recall from last time, if you were with us, are multi-issue negotiations or negotiations with more than one issue. And so I'm going to review those strategies because they're absolutely key to know before any negotiation. Before you walk into a negotiation, you need to know what these strategies are and use them appropriately. Then we're going to be talking about generating a point schedule. So we have different interests and we need to find a way to figure out how to present or think about our interests during a negotiation. And what research has shown is the best way to do that is with a point schedule. So we're going to talk about how to generate a point schedule and use it during your negotiation. And then we're going to be talking about influence tactics. It turns out there's a lot of research on how to influence others. And I'm going to be talking about 6 different strategies that you can use during your negotiations. You can make choices or not, whether or not to use these tactics. They tend to be pretty influential in your negotiations. All right, so let's get started. So here we are with our different courses that we've gone through. We started off with introduction, moved on to single issue. Last time we did multiple issue. And today, here we are at influence. The next one is going to be the multi-person negotiation. So we're going to have group negotiation discussions. And as you can imagine, things get a little bit more complicated when you're negotiating with 3 other people, 4 other people, 5 other people versus just one person. All right. So again, here are these integrative strategies we want to be using in the negotiation. The first one is developing trust. That's when you treat the other person with respect and when you develop these positive consequences for their behavior. If you remember, last time we talked about how carrots versus sticks, the carrots are going to win in the end. The carrots are going to be more motivating. So in the negotiation, we want to reward positive behavior with a concession or positive actions yourself. We also want to have you exhibit trustworthy behavior, and that will be reciprocated by the other party. And you can also identify and highlight identification. So this is when you share something with the other person that is the same. So Alyssa and I both at the University of Washington, we have something in common, I'm going to highlight that. That makes it to where I'm going to be more trustworthy to Alyssa now because we highlight that. Jay and I have kids in the Seattle Public Schools. By highlighting that, we're both going to have more trust towards one another. This is also very good. Identification-based trust is also really good influence tactic that you'll learn in a moment. The next thing you want to do is share your interests or what you want. And what we learned during the case last time is that sometimes people focus on the really good reason you want something. Specifically, we had a case where one party wanted the peel and the other party wanted the juice of an orange, but they focused on, some of us focused on the really good reason you wanted something. And that really good reason was really important. So it was saving babies or saving the West Coast. These are really important things. However, what they needed was either a peel or the juice of an orange. So we need to be focusing on what you want in the negotiation and not the really good reason. It's really cool to share the reason, but first we need to share what we want. Then we need to be asking questions to the other side about their interests. So we could be saying things like, if you could imagine a perfect deal, what would it look like? We could say, of these two issues, the peel or the juice, which one do you care more about in terms of the orange? So we want to be asking questions about the other party's interests in order to figure out what they are and in order to meet them. Then we're going to make trade-offs. Now, I want to say that it's really important to make concessions in a negotiation, but what we want to do is make those strategic concessions. So specifically what we're going to do is we're going to give on an issue that is less important to me. So I'm going to give on something that I don't care as much about in order to gain on an issue that's more important to me. So I'm going to pair two issues together. One issue I care a lot about, the other issue I don't care as much about, but the other party does care about. I'm going to give on something, again, that's less important in order to gain on something that's more important. I know it doesn't sound like rocket science, does it? Not at all. You can do this strategy. But what's important to know before you start having this strategy work, you have to know what is the order of importance for these different issues for the other party. Is this their number one issue, their number two issue, their number three issue? So how does it rank? And then make trade-offs for something that they're going to want. Then we learned how to make contingency contracts. Now, these are if-then statements. If something happens in the world, then something else happens in the world. These are an example of this is, I think that my sister and I both inherited some property. I think the property is going to do really well. I think it's going to be more profitable to hang on to it. My sister disagrees. So we do an if-then statement. Right, we could argue about it a lot, but instead we're going to bet on it. And so I'll give her the value of the property right now, half the value of the property right now, and then I'll keep it. I'll keep the property and I'll get any gains of it by keeping that property on. So that's an example of a contingency contract based on differences in expectations for the future. All right, so this is a strategy we didn't have a chance to talk about next time that I am very, very, very excited about. The reason why I'm excited about this strategy is because it works. It works very, very well. And so I encourage you to use this in your negotiations if you have the opportunity. So it's called a post-settlement settlement, but what really it is just an agreement after an agreement. So let's say you come to an agreement. You spent your time at the negotiation table. You worked really hard. Before the negotiation, you found out your BATNA reservation point and target. During the negotiation, you made those trade-offs, strategic compromises. You shared trust, asked questions. You did all the things that you were supposed to do in that negotiation, and you came up with a negotiated outcome the best that you can. And now you have this contract. Everything is signed, it's sealed, it's delivered, it's done. The lawyers have looked over it. You have a done contract. Now, a month later, a year later, or whenever is appropriate, you decide to come back to that contract. COVID was a really good time to come back to some contracts because things change. So it could be you come back to it based on things changing, you have a new idea, you have a new product. And you ask the other party to come back to the table to see if you can come to a better agreement. And typically what people say is, let's see if we can make this pie a little bit sweeter. Let's see if we can make this deal a little bit better for both of us. So you decide to invest more time at the table. And if you decide to make that investment, then the agreement is going to be that both sides get better, or one party stays the same and the other side gets better. It's not going to hurt you at all. It's only going to help you or have you stay the same by being involved in this next negotiation. What this does is it helps the other side. If the other side isn't sharing information about their interests, or they don't know what their interests are and you have to help them develop their interests, what this does is it makes it such the other side feels much more comfortable sharing their interests in the second negotiation. They already have their contract that they can rely on. We have this contract that's already signed, it's done, and they can rely on that agreement. And so because of that, they feel more trusting to share information with you about what they truly feel and what they truly expect. And so that increase in information sharing leads to increase in collaboration, which leads to better outcomes. And this works 75% of the time. 75% of the time, this works. So I want this to be in your pocket. I want you to use this strategy. Again, get at the table, try your best to get the best agreement possible, but engage in this post-settlement settlement if you have the opportunity to do so. Now, in some industries, it would be inappropriate to do a post-settlement settlement at all. And in some industries, they're doing post-settlement settlements all the time. So it's based on your industry when it's appropriate to do this, and based on timing and what happens in the environment. Again, I saw a lot of post-settlement settlements happen once COVID hit. Once COVID hit, a lot of things in the environment changed. There was a lot of uncertainty that was created, and that made it such that a lot of people needed to revisit their contracts. And that's what this is a post-settlement settlement. All right, so now you have all the integrated strategies. All right, I'm going to move on to creating a point schedule, and then we're going to come back and we're going to answer some questions. All right, so as I mentioned, it's absolutely vital to know what your interests are in the negotiation. And this is going to involve some homework for you before the negotiation. As part of your planning, I want you to sit down and write down all of the different things that are involved in this particular outcome that you're about to negotiate. So for example, let's think of all the issues that are involved in an outcome. So all the things that are involved in a job. Alyssa just told us before we started that she has already gotten an offer, if it's okay for me to say, Alyssa, for a summer internship for next summer. So congratulations, Alyssa. And she's looking at potentially, maybe, who knows what's going to happen. She's thinking about accepting it and moving forward. So Alyssa, for your homework, I want you to write down everything included in that internship. So all of the different things that might be included. It could be the number of hours that are worked. It could be the flex time. It could be the assignments that you would be doing. It could be the type of work that you would be doing. It could be who you're working with. So write down everything that might be included in this outcome. All right, so the next thing in creating a point schedule is now you're going to order that list according to what's most and least important to you. So some things in a job just don't matter to you, and some things matter a lot. And so this is your chance to figure out, just on your own or with a teammate if you're going to do a team negotiation, and figure out what is your list, what's most important to least important to you. And then we're going to take away things that are not important at all, that you're just not, they're not important enough to negotiate. The other party, by the way, might bring these issues in, because just because they're not important to you doesn't mean they're not important to the other party. But you aren't going to include it in your point schedule because it's not important to you. Then we're going to assign percentage values to each one of the issues based on your interests. So the first step, just writing down all the issues. The second step, most to least important. And now we're actually putting percentages on how important is number 1 compared to number 2, compared to number 3, compared to number 4. Now you only have 100%. Now when people first engage as a strategy, they don't ever add up to 100% when you start off. So this is going to take a little bit for you to adjust everything, figure out how much you care about each one of these issues, and have them all add up to 100%. The next thing you're going to do is allocate your points based on those percentages. So I suggest having 1,000 points, or maybe 10,000 points, or maybe 100 points be the sum or your target. And then for each issue, you might have location be worth 300 points, type of work be worth 200 points, salary be worth 150 points. Okay, so here's one of my sample point schedules. So this is the point schedule, or a very condensed version of the point schedule that I was developing when I was trying to make a decision about whether or not to take the job offer at the University of Washington. So at the time, I was a professor at the Texas A&M University. I happened to be from Texas, a lot of family in Texas. And so it was a really attractive institution, great research institution, but it was also in a really small city of College Station. So I wasn't super excited about continuing to live in a really small city. So I tried to figure out what my interests were before engaging in this negotiation. Now, the city to me was going to be worth 300 points. So I wanted to be in a big city. That was really important to me. And a big city meant a lot of things to me. So it meant restaurants, it meant having access to sports teams, and arts. So Texas A&M, you know, on their points, they had 250 points, but that was because I was living in Austin at the time. So Austin really is the thing that's getting 250 points, which will come in a moment. So then colleagues, I really wanted to have nice colleagues. Now this is really important when you're a professor, because there's something called tenure. That means if that person gets tenure, they're there until they die. And that's a long time. So I'm going to maybe be looking at this person for the rest of my life. And is that something that I really want to do? So having good colleagues is really important to me, or it was really important to me. And so colleagues was my second issue. And Texas A&M, I had fantastic colleagues. So Texas A&M got 200 points. My commute. Now I was spending an hour and a half going one way. So 3 hours if I had to go both ways from Austin to College Station. So that's a trek. So commute was my number 3 issue. I was done with the commute. I did not want to have that anymore. So it had 170 points possible, and Texas A&M had 0 because it had a really bad commute. Then research support, that was also really important to me. I also got really great research support from Texas A&M, so I felt good about that. Now, distance from family, this is something that I was not very intelligent about. So post hoc, I wasn't really thinking when I developed this issue. I didn't want to be really far from my family, and so I gave it 100 points. But I thought that moving, I looked at time as in, you know, if I was on a plane, it takes 5 hours to get from Seattle to Dallas. And it takes 4 hours to drive from Austin to Dallas. So that's almost the same, isn't it? But then I thought about, well, what I didn't realize is when I had children, that having children on a plane equals death. I mean, it's really not fun to have children on a plane, especially small children, which I have right now. And so I was not considering that. So right now I would have a different point schedule, and I would evaluate this one differently. And then salary. So salary was my last option. So, all right, now in looking at this, my target was 1,000 points. My reservation point, what I had at Texas A&M, was 760. So whatever university I was looking to go to, it needed to offer me more than 760 points. And what that meant is that it severely restricted the locations that I applied to. And I really only applied to the University of Washington because it was the only one that was going to give me a better point value closer to my target. And so I applied here, and luckily I got a job here. So here I am. All right, so this is my example of a point schedule. It was much more detailed, but it's a quick example just so you can see how it went. All right, so now questions.
Great, we just got a question, so perfect timing. We're a little confused about where the 1,000 points came from. If you could elaborate on that.
It's adding up all the points possible on my point schedule.
Okay.
So it really
And
is just a random number based on my interests.
okay, because the numbers are percentages, would it normally add up to a factor of 10, like to 1,000? Do you know what I mean?
Typically, yes.
Okay.
Sometimes I've seen a lot of different point schedules, and as the issues, so I've seen a point schedule that involved 50 different issues. So there was fractions and other things that you can consider. So depending on how complex the negotiation is, your point schedule might not look as pretty and clean as what I've demonstrated.
Okay.
The most important thing with a point schedule is that it helps you treat issues that are non-numeric, and it helps you treat them as important as you feel like they are. If you look at some of my issues, city is not a numeric issue. It really isn't. But it's my number one. Colleagues, also not a numeric issue, but it's my number two. Commute, that you can put in miles. So we can probably put a numeric issue to that. But again, that gets to my number three issue. So what this does is help you put a numeric value, and human beings like to think in terms of numerics. It puts a numeric value on how important is this to you and what does this mean to you. The other thing I want you to note about this point schedule is that many of these things are not negotiable for the university. So I couldn't say to the University of Washington, I would like you to have better sports teams, which I would never say that because the city of Seattle has absolutely fantastic sports teams and I wouldn't change anything about them. But that's not something that's negotiable, is it? Colleagues, I can't tell them to fire someone if I didn't like someone. So that's also not negotiable. Commute, that's really up to me where I end up living. Research support, yes, I can negotiate that. Distance from family, they can't tell my family to move. So no, that's not negotiable. So really salary and research support are really the only things that I can negotiate.
Okay, great. And then Kevin has some questions. He wants to know if you have a recommendation for the number of points.
I think it's a really good idea to keep it a round number just for your brain. And what it helps you, I'm continuously thinking of, I need to get to that 1,000 points. So it helps you with your own anchoring to get there. So if you need help generating this first point schedule, I encourage you to reach out to a family member, a friend, let them know just the process and they can help you develop it. If you need an extra help, then send it to the email link for our group and I can provide you some help with that. I'm happy to do it. Doing a point schedule for the first time is tough. This is something, but it's also something that's really, really important because if you don't do this, then what you'll do in those negotiations is focus on things that you might not care about as much. In a negotiation, again, you tend to focus on those numeric items. And if those are the things that you really don't care that much about, then you're focusing on the wrong things in that negotiation.
And then Kevin is also wondering, when you ask about another person's interest, are you trying to understand their point schedule?
Yes, exactly. And so really you're saying, when you say, what are your interests? You're saying, what does your point schedule look like? But the other side probably has never encountered a point schedule before and they don't know what it looks like. So yeah, I have in my negotiations with other parties, I've sat and I've developed a point schedule with them to help them develop and figure out what their interests are. So I'll say, okay, so of these two issues, which is more important to you? And we'll go through and I'll help them develop their point schedule. And that can be really helpful for you and the other party. So then you can make strategic trade-offs.
Okay, great. And then one question I had as this was going on, as you're talking to someone and they're kind of trying, I'm sure most parties, like you said, won't have a point schedule, but they're laying out their interests and they say something that you forgot about and you realize that that's something you actually do care about. Do you recommend pausing or what would you do in that situation?
If you can pause, if you have the opportunity to do so, then do pause and then revisit your point schedule for a moment and figure out where would that go on this or how many points would that add? So then you can you're kind of expanding your pie, aren't you? You're adding more points to your point schedule. So yeah. And by the way, that's pretty common. You want to find out as much as you can before the negotiation, but things are going to adjust over time.
Right. Okay. And then one more question. How is it derived if something is negotiable? If it is 80 and they pay 80, please elaborate. So I think just a little more confusion on the point schedule and how you assign points to issues.
Okay, so I come back to this. So the points that I allocated for this issue, let's go with city. All right, a city gets 300 points for me if they have great music, great sports teams, great restaurants, great art. So if they have all 4 of those things at high levels, then they get 300 points. A city will get less points. So the sports teams are pretty important to me. So the next is if they have the other 3, but low on sports, that'll be 250 points for me. And then they'll go down. So salary, let's say for a person like me in an organization like this, 100,000 is my target salary. That's the best that I can possibly do. And for a person like me in a university, then 100,000 gets 80 points. If I was at 99,000, that might be 79 points. And then I would take it down from there. Does that help?
I think so. I hope so. And if it didn't, please come join us in office hours and we'll be able to answer some more questions there. But for now, are you ready to move on?
Sure.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay. So now I'm excited to go through Cialdini's influence tactics. The reason why they're Cialdini is because Cialdini was a landmark social scientist who started doing research on how to influence others. And it turns out there's 6 key things that we can do to influence others. Now, when I start talking about these things, you're going to notice that these different things are in your environment. This happens a lot. Marketers know about these things, skilled negotiators know about these different tactics, and now you're going to know about these different tactics. Now, it's up to you if you want to make the decision to use these tactics or not use these tactics. These are up to you. But I want you to be aware of these tactics because very likely they are being used on you. All right, so first, scarcity. It turns out that people want what other people can't have or what is scarce. And so here's some examples of brands that people are attracted to because they're hard to get and they're very expensive. But it could be, for example, a couple of years ago in France, there was a shortage on butter. And of course, there was an announcement that there was going to be a shortage on butter. And what do you think happened? Pretty much everybody went out and got all the butter and started putting in their freezer. And there are pictures of butter in freezers. So when something is scarce or we know that something is going to be scarce, then we try to get out and we try to get and obtain whatever that is. I'm unsure if that's what happened with toilet paper at the beginning of this crisis, but I think that something like that might have been occurring, maybe. I'm not sure. Now, what does this do for you? If you have access to maybe scarce information, if something new just happened, then you might call a customer and client and say, you know what, nobody knows this. This is something really new. And all of a sudden, that person is going to call you back immediately or email you back immediately. They're going to want to know. This is this human tendency to want to know things that not a lot of people know. You also might highlight what's different for you. How are you a special candidate? Why would they want to hire you? What unique characteristics do you bring to the table? You might also highlight the unique characteristics of your product. Highlight it, how it's exclusive, how it is special and scarce. So try to use this tactic as appropriate. All right, so for you, Alyssa, you might highlight how you have this unique mix of expertise, education, and experience. I have these tailor-made for you.
I think you're making me sound better than I am, but thank you.
It's not true. All right, so this is the strategy that we've been talking a lot about, which is reciprocity. As you know, we reciprocate. If I am positive to you, you'll be positive to me. If I'm respectful to you, you'll be respectful to me. We want to repay these favors. If somebody does a favor for me, I'm going to do a favor for them. This is how human beings work, and that's how social societies works. So reciprocity is absolutely fundamental to negotiations. So that's why when you make an offer, the other party is likely to make an offer in return. When you share your interests, the other party is also likely to share their interests. But sometimes we need to think about when we do these favors. So how much do people value a favor immediately versus 1 month after it's performed? So let's say you have a big ask for your boss. And your boss comes to you and needs a favor. Do you ask that favor immediately, or do you wait a month before you ask your favor? All right, so here we go for the results immediately. As you can tell here, if this is the extent to which the other party values what you just did for them, the favor that you just did for them. So the receiver values that favor a lot immediately, but the giver, the person who did it, doesn't value it as much. So immediately, again, the receiver really values it, the giver not so much. This interesting thing that happens over time is that now the giver over time tends to value it more and more and more, but the receiver values it less. And so what does this mean? This means if you have an ask, you should do it immediately. You should do it when the receiver is ready to reciprocate. So if it's immediate, that receiver really values the favor that you did for them, and they're more likely to reciprocate it immediately. If you wait a month, then your boss is less likely to consider that or think about that favor. So my suggestion to you is it might not be immediate, but as close as possible to when you did that favor. And that way the other party will reciprocate. All right, so in a negotiation, you can highlight how you've come down on something, how you have made a concession in order to get the other party to make a concession as well. And by the way, this is really present when we do our trade-offs. So a trade-off is just a reciprocation all wrapped up into one. So I'm giving on something that's less important in order to gain on something that's more important. It's reciprocity all wrapped up into one. All right, so now the research on reciprocity is really surprising. And what it shows is that even small gifts, even as small as a pen, if I give another party a pen, then this is going to impact their behavior. This will significantly impact their behavior if I just give them some trinket. Now, you know, a lot of professions, for example, doctors are not allowed to accept large gifts from pharmaceutical companies now. It used to be doctors could accept lavish trips, and they would say, well, doctors are really smart and it won't impact their behavior. But what we know is that that's not the case at all. What we know is that even if I give you a very small gift that's worth 20 cents, that will impact your behavior. This research was done with cookies, it was done with trinkets, and I can impact your behavior with very small things. So how you use this is up to you. You might bring coffee to your negotiation. Of course, not during COVID times, but during other non-COVID times. You could send during COVID times some chocolates or truffles or something that would be appropriate to the client. I have people in my executive MBA classes who send really cool little gifts to their clients once a year. Now this is developing this reciprocity. They're impacting your behavior. So I ask you a question, and that is, what method is more effective means of thwarting this reciprocity? So by accepting even a small gift, it's impacting my behavior. Should I accept the favor and then tell myself to discount it, or just not accept it and politely refuse them instead? So I'll let you develop your answer, and then I'll let you know what the answer is. So it turns out that refusal is always going to be better for you and your company. If you don't already have it, if you have your own organization, I encourage you to set up a no gifts policy. This is going to be really, if it's appropriate in your industry. I recognize in some industries it's not appropriate to do so. But if you set up a no gifts policy, that really empowers your employees to say no to these gifts, and it makes it such that they're less likely to be influenced by these gifts, and it's really going to protect your organization moving forward. I think at the University of Washington, we have a $20 limit gift, but again, that's going to influence our behavior. Finally, we have consistency, and then we'll get to some questions. So consistency is a really important influence tactic that you can use. People like to be consistent, their behavior and their attitudes to be consistent, and their previous behavior to be consistent with their future behavior. So Cialdini showed the influence of this tactic in a research study in which he went and his research students went to a large apartment complex. And they went to half of the apartment complex and asked half of the individuals to sign a petition to support a good cause. And the cause was to support the disabled in the community. So it's a good cause. And everyone who answered the door ended up signing it. Then they went back a few weeks later. And they had people indicate how much money they were willing to give. So they're actually going to donate to the cause. So again, it was a really good cause, supporting the disabled in the community. I'll start out by telling you, remember half of them didn't have the opportunity to sign the petition. And of the half that didn't have the opportunity to sign the petition, 50% of them ended up giving money. So 50% is pretty good. It was a good cause. But they had 92% who signed the petition, who had the opportunity to sign the petition, donate. So it's a 42% increase. If you had just people sign something to support a cause, then they were much more likely to donate to the cause. So people's attitudes, expressed attitudes and behavior, they want to be consistent. So what does this mean to you? It means that let's say you have a negotiation, and the other person you're negotiating with has expressed an attitude that's consistent with what you want to ask for. This is something that I use sometimes in my negotiations. I tend to, in my service work, I tend to work on diversity and inclusion committees. And it turns out that many organizations and universities put inclusion and diversity statements on websites. And so what I do is I take that diversity and inclusion statement and I include it in my ask. So I say, this is an important value of this institution or this organization, and I say the value. And that is why I'm asking for X. So typically it's more money or more resources put towards diversity and inclusion. So expressing that their attitude, their previous attitude, and encouraging them to be consistent with that attitude. I'm much more likely to get a yes in that circumstance. Sorry about that. For you, in other means, you could ask for, if someone had already given you a certain concession, you can ask them to give more of a concession. If someone's already conceded some, then they're more likely to concede others. All right, so now it's question time.
Okay, we actually, as you were using toilet paper as an example, Natasha also suggested the toilet paper example, and I was thinking of it too. I know it's fresh in everybody's mind. It's very traumatic.
It was. That was something.
Yeah. I also flour. There was a shortage of flour for a little bit, so that was something else I was thinking of. Other than that, we just got a question. Kevin wants to know, how can these tactics backfire?
So I think that the consistency one can really harm us, and it does harm us. It harms a lot of leaders because sometimes as a leader, to be a strong leader, it means that you have to say that you were wrong and you made a wrong choice. And I think that that's an incredibly important characteristic for a leader to have. For a leader to say, you know what, I was wrong, I made a wrong choice, and now I'm going to pivot the company in a different direction. I think that is absolutely fundamental, but it flies in the face of consistency. And at the same time, we just have to break with consistency when it's important to do so, and be ethical and honest and move forward. Yeah. I think that with regard to reciprocity, in some cultures, so specifically when I've had people go and negotiate with individuals from specific cultures where it's very appropriate to give gifts, and you want to have matching sized gifts even is really important. So in Japan specifically, in some companies, this might come up, and not giving a gift can create a problem. So my zero gift receiving and gift giving could become a problem in those cultures. But I do think that one other thing about the countries who tend to like gift giving, they also are the same hierarchy enhancing type cultures in which orders from the boss are seen as really important. So if you do have a statement from the company president where you cannot accept nor give gifts, then someone from a culture in which gift giving is really important, that would be okay. So it is important to just send a statement before you have your first meeting and let the other party know, especially if you're going to a culture in which gift giving is really prominent and important socialization means. Just let them know that it's inappropriate for you to bring gifts and here's a company policy. And then you kind of take away that issue.
Okay, that makes sense. I was wondering how you jump the consistency hurdle if the person's behavior has been to your detriment in the past. So if they're being really stubborn and they want to keep being really stubborn, can the consistency hurt you in those situations?
Certainly. So you would not want to highlight, you're only going to highlight their behavior when it's consistent with the behavior that you want to see. And so I would not mention any previous contract or any previous behavior. I would only mention the attitudes and behaviors that you want to see again. So I would kind of like give it a pass, kind of.
Right.
Yeah. I kind of, so I think in Star Wars, they kind of, you didn't hear that just now, you know that? I don't do this because that would be weird in a negotiation, but kind of in my mind, I do. So I just take a pause when someone is behaving in a way that I don't want to reciprocate and I don't want to see moving forward. So in my mind, I just forget that that happened.
Mm-hmm. And Judith has a interesting question. Going back to the COVID and consistency, should the CDC have handled the whole "you don't need a mask" debacle differently? Just going back and forth.
Yeah, we're gonna, yeah, so I think that a lot of these influence tactics can be related to the mask issue. Going back and forth is not good for a leader, as I mentioned. It is really important to provide a reason for going back and forth. And I think the public is somewhat, I think that we can be accommodating. It's going back and forth that's a problem. So we'll take one, oh, I was wrong. But if there's multiple, oh, I was wrong, then we start to question the legitimacy. And so I think that that's actually one of the problems that the CDC has faced moving forward. And I think it's also a problem inherent within a really big catastrophe that we're in right now. I mean, we ask for leaders to make decisions, and then when they make decisions, then we criticize them later on for making those decisions, and then that's what causes the back and forth and the back and forth. So I think that being a leader at the time of the pandemic is incredibly difficult. So I do not envy their situation right now. I think it's incredibly difficult.
Not at all. We do have a few more questions, but we also only have 10 minutes left in this session. So do you want to keep going and then we can get to the rest of the questions during office hours?
I'll go ahead and I'll get to the next three. And I think that we'll try to get to those questions at the next break. And if we can't, then we'll get them during office hours.
Great, sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Okay, so social proof, this is a big one. Social proof. So if other people are doing things, then I'm gonna do things too. If other people are not doing things, then I'm also not gonna do things. So this is gonna be really key for us. And I think it relates to this mask issue. An example that I have is there is a principal who wanted to decrease the amount of students who were smoking marijuana. So this was a high school principal. He wanted to decrease the amount of marijuana smoke, high school students smoking marijuana. But unfortunately, this high school principal sent a letter to the parents indicating that something like 75% of students have tried marijuana in this high school. This is a really big problem. We need to stop this. Well, what social proof tells us is that that's going to drastically increase the number of people who are smoking marijuana. So when something is a problem, we do not use percentages related to it. When people are engaging, when the norm is something that we want people to engage in, then we will share normative information about it. And that's where the news comes into play. Unfortunately, sometimes the news says, this is a really big problem. We have everybody who's not wearing masks. And what happens then is that people are less likely to wear a mask. Whereas if the news would have been silent about that issue, then people would just engage in the behavior and choose whether or not to wear a mask on their own. But because things become normative, we want to follow those social norms. And so changing those social norms can be really, really difficult. And that's why we want to start off right. And we want to use social proof when other people engage in positive behavior. So we can focus on the positive behavior that people are engaging in and say that, you know, X amount of people are socially distancing. This is fantastic. We want to continue this. Or highlight the cities that are doing a really good job with the social distancing. So that's a COVID example, but in a business example, you could say, you see this on commercials, like 4 out of 5 dentists approved. This is social proof in action. You can see this in graduation rates. We're trying to, you know, 90% of people have been out there getting a job and they're doing great. That's going to encourage everybody to do great. It's also going to bring other people to the program. So we want to fit in, we want to do what everybody else is doing, and that's for good and bad things. So as a leader, I want you to use social proof to your advantage. If people are doing really good things and the group is doing really good things, then highlight that, and then you're more likely to see that moving forward. But if people are doing not great things, then be silent about it and don't say anything about the social proof. I'm not saying lie about it, but we're not going to provide social information. All right. So an example of this could be like, I've had 3 promising offers, but I really want to come and work for your company. So I've had lots of great offers, but what I want to do is come work for you. And then we have authority. So people want to listen to others with status or expertise, even if their arguments aren't very strong. So for you, it's important for you to somehow demonstrate your authority or say why we should be listening to you, or why are you the person that we should be negotiating with? Why you? And so you need to be answering that question. Even as far back as Aristotle, he called it ethos. So this notion of why should we think of you as being persuasive? So you can demonstrate authority in a number of ways. You can say how long you've been doing this in this specific industry. Let's say you don't have that much experience. Then you can say, you know, where you got your degree. I do think, by the way, if someone doesn't introduce you and say why all of your qualifications, then it is important for you to highlight your qualifications to the other party. This is another reason to use the LinkedIn. I know this is something that we talked about early on, and get your LinkedIn profile looking really good. So it's one way that you can demonstrate authority. So your LinkedIn, your website, why should we be listening to you? I know at Microsoft, if you've been there a certain number of years, you get increasingly larger statues. So like if you've been there 15 years, it's this big, 30 years, you know, it just gets larger and larger. So that's another way, an easy way to demonstrate authority. Another way is just diplomas. Another way is via dress, how you look. This is kind of an interesting thing because if you were to walk into Google and you were wearing a suit, you would not be demonstrating authority at all. So you would be not fitting in. And so you really need to think about how to demonstrate authority. Some superficial markers of authority that research has shown is having a deep voice, having gray hair. I was super excited when I started to get some gray hair. Wearing eyeglasses. This is something easy that anybody can do, but it's not the eyeglasses, you know, with no lenses that some basketball players were wearing. That does not work, but eyeglasses definitely work. What you're wearing definitely works, and your height, so taller people. Now, this doesn't mean that if you don't have any of these things, then you're not going to be have authority. One of my really good friends is incredibly short, doesn't have a deep voice, but man, when she enters the room, she has enormous authority, and you just know. She just brings her authority with her. All right. So the other thing that we need to think about is liking. So we do things for people that we like. If we like someone, then we're more likely to have a positive negotiated outcome with them. So we like people who are attractive, who are similar to us. This gets in the trust identification realm, and also who like us. So now we're getting into flattery. So when you're in the negotiation, it's important to say why you like this product, why you like this company, why you like this organization. So highlight in an appropriate way, flatter the other person. I will say that my students have told me it's inappropriate to, unless you're a model, to flatter the other person with regard to their dress or their makeup or anything about the appearance. But it is very appropriate to highlight the other person, whatever type of performance they're engaged in. So let's say they're a research scientist, so you can flatter them about their research, or you can flatter them about their product that they just developed. Like, that is a very appropriate way to flatter the other person that's going to be very impactful to them. All right, so MBA students were told to engage in high or low levels of flattery. I really like this study. And an appropriate way, not weird way. So appropriate flattery about the organization. And those who engaged in high levels of flattery got 1.45 more offers. I should have told you about this, Alyssa, before. They had higher starting salaries. And by the way, this effect was linear. So the more flattery, the more offers, the more salaries, not curvilinear. And the interviewers were told in advance that there would be different levels, that the researchers were varying flattery. So even when people knew that they were about to get ingratiating behavior and to watch out for it, it still impacted their offers and their salaries. But again, beware of the slime effect. So we're only going to be doing behaviors that make sense, or giving flattery on things that make sense, not our appearance. Okay, so we have a couple minutes for questions.
Right. Right now I am sending the link to office hours in the chat just because I know that can get confusing. So that's where that is. I believe Jay is also sending an email, but we will get to one or two questions real quick before we move over there. Saida has a question. She says, what are ways women identified folks to demonstrate authority in a dignified way outside of social expectations? Also, women of color, especially Black women, might be negatively changed if they use power/authority tactics that white women can use. Any insights into this would be great.
Well, I do think that one subtle way, it makes me very uncomfortable to share information about my qualifications or my authority. So sometimes I get someone else to introduce me. So I find a friend coming along with me, and my friend introduces me to another person, and they can talk about my authority. And hopefully this friend is also high status and known by the other party. Another way you could do it pretty easily is put a link at the bottom of your email that just links directly to your LinkedIn page, also your website. People will click on that and see that. And another thing, in my office, you don't see it now, but in my office, I have my diplomas just right there behind me. If you have something like that, I don't know what it means in your industry, but put it right there when you're on the Zoom call, and that has a huge impact. I know we're out of time, but I'm going to tell you about this research study anyway. So, and I'm sorry for that. If you have to go, then go ahead and go. But Cialdini did a research study in which there were stroke victims were not engaging in their physical therapy after they left the hospital. So when they were in the hospital, they were doing their physical therapy. But once they left the hospital, they tended to not do their physical therapy. So they brought Cialdini in. He did one thing, and that is put all the awards and diplomas of all the physical therapists up on the walls. And that increased compliance with physical therapy by 34%. That one thing changed it. So these really subtle things can have really big effects on the behavior of others. So put those subtle authority hints up, and that can really help you. All right, so let's head over. We're going to do a negotiation. So we're going to head over to office hours and do a negotiation.
Yes, I just put the link in the chat again. So I'm going to head over there since I'm the host. No one can get in unless I'm there. So thank you everyone for being here and participating.
I also emailed it to everyone. So if you don't get it from the chat here, check your inbox and you'll have a link to it there too.
Great. Thanks, Jay.
Sure.